Long time no see, people. What's going on? I am Jaimi Alexander, and this is Kings Speak. So here is kind of like a round table. Okay, well, it's really just me interviewing one person. But this is an opportunity to hear men speak about things that they normally don't speak about and really dive deeper into the minds of men, vulnerability, how to be in a relationship, personal codes and values, and all of these things that are so important to our lifestyles and how we grow, live, and love, and enter relationships and all of these things. So today we have an amazing guest. He's a great friend of mine, brilliant man. His name is Fontaine. He's a marketing specialist. And I love talking to him because when you're working with an expert, you get to really dive in and understand what's going on with what. And what fascinates me about marketing and PR on a personal note is how many industries use it to get us to think what they need us to think so we can buy into whatever they want us to buy into. So are your thoughts your own? Is what you are about and what you are choosing and living on a daily basis coming from your soul? Are you being marketed to? Let's find out. See if Mick is in the chat. Oh, yeah. Get him up in here. Hey, Mick.
What's happening?
Happy belated birthday.
Thank you, boo. I appreciate that.
Oh, my God. It's so good to see you.
Always a pleasure.
I might need to get my earphones in. Y'all got to be patient with me. I'm in an empty house. I relocated and you could probably hear echoes and all kinds of stuff going on. How's that? Is that better?
Oh, yeah. That's
way better. Love it.
I should do the same, honestly.
You sound good to me.
Okay,
what's up? Who's in the chat? Mick sound good? Do we sound good? I don't know. Somebody might respond up in there, but if you feel like throwing your earphones in at some point, you could do that. Hey, Steve Harvey suit collection. All right, B Main TV3. That's sweet. All right, Mick. So for people, I gave you a little bit of an introduction, but for people who don't know who you are, why don't you let the people know who you are and what your expertise is?
All right. So my name is Mick. I'm a marketer, and I'm from Mississippi. So 3 M's going on there. Mick, marketer, Mississippi. I specialize in helping brands to reach their target audience and to be able to convert people to customers. So that's what marketing is. We get customers.
Okay. And I know you're really good at that. You've turned pretty much nothing into $1 million business, and I've watched you do it. So congratulations. You really know your stuff. Love it.
Well, thank you.
So I wrote some questions down. So let's talk marketing and its purpose. Okay. Which you just shared, it's to get customers. So let's talk about the difference between what to think and how to think and how that relates to marketing and bringing you on as a customer.
Oh, you want to go there, huh?
I'm ready to dive in. We need to find out what's going on.
Okay. What to think and how to think. Okay. Number one, most people have not been taught how to think. Most people have been taught what to think. So we can make a very clear distinction there. Most people have never been trained on how to think. What we've been taught is what to think. So from conception, you've been marketed to and you've been told what to think, how things are supposed to happen, all of these things. And you've had all of this stuff drilled into your mind all of these years subconsciously without you even knowing what was up. You want to know who's the best at it?
Who?
You may not like this answer, but Trump.
Oh, no. Donald Trump?
Absolutely the best marketer in the world. Hands down.
That's insane. I get it. I mean, there's something to it because, obviously he's done like the reality TV show, this, that, and the other. But you're right. His sound bites and how he functions, he really knows how to grab these people and irritate these people. Get this going and sound crazy over here. And all of us are just fighting with each other, fighting with Twitter, looking at this and that, and just getting into this mayhem. So politics is definitely using marketing left and right to get us to,
all day, every day. Can't stop, won't stop.
So how did PR get started? You told me a very interesting story about a gentleman named Bernays. So I want to talk about PR and how industries like politics even got their hands on the idea that they could manipulate the minds of the masses through marketing and PR.
So it's a very interesting story, and it's probably a person that you've never heard of before. It's kind of a hidden figure, but a very powerful figure in modern history. And it's a gentleman by the name of Edward Bernays, who is credited with much of what modern PR and what modern advertising is. And interestingly enough, he was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and he started off working directly for the U.S. Army in World War One, pretty much writing propaganda to be able to influence people to support the war. And after the war, he moved into private practice, and he thought that propaganda, he actually wrote a book on propaganda, by the way, back in 1928. But he decided that the word propaganda was too stigmatized, so he called it PR.
Oh my God, public relations.
Public relations, yes.
Y'all trying to get us. And that's so interesting because even when I hear that, propaganda, I didn't realize this was something that goes back to 1928. That was a long time ago.
Oh yeah, it's a long time ago, and this stuff has been embedded for a very long time. He was the first who actually went and started to use these techniques, and a lot of these techniques came from psychoanalysis that his uncle Sigmund Freud pioneered. So he understood that the unconscious mind could be manipulated, and he wanted to apply those principles to being able to use industry and use those same techniques in industry, because the bottom belief of Freudian psychoanalysis is that individuals can't be trusted with their own thoughts. Their own thoughts are too dangerous. So individuals had to be controlled in order to be able to function in a democracy.
That sounds crazy to me.
Yeah, it's real stuff, man. You can research this stuff.
Because when you use words like psychoanalysis, and then, I love neuropsychology, I love neuroscience, I love how the brain works. It's like we're so lucky to have the understanding of these things, but somebody always got to use it as a weapon of mass destruction.
Right. Well, the key to it is that most people do not understand these things. Most people don't understand these things because most people have not been taught how to think. You've been told how to think. You haven't been taught how to think. So you just go along for the ride. Well, Trump is pretty devious in what he does. He's brilliant at what he does, but he's pretty diabolical in what he does. And to the untrained eye and to the untrained ear, he may seem like he's an idiot, but he's not an idiot at all. He's doing all these things intentionally. He's manipulating intentionally, and he's doing it from the presidential platform, which is so interesting. And no one has ever done it to that extent. I mean, the dude he's a beast. I mean, so I mean, he's learned this over time. Of course, he's been able to perfect this over time, and not to get too deep into politics because that's a whole different discussion.
Yeah.
That we can have. But one of the things that people get riled up about, and I've been guilty of this also before I really had a acute understanding of these things, is when he speaks, he speaks in such a way that there's no fact there, and we've been kind of conditioned to think that you gotta be truthful in what you're saying. There has to be fact there, but because he's using these strategies and he's using these manipulation techniques, it's all bias and fallacy that he's using, and he's using that bias and fallacy in order to get people to act, to get people riled up, to get people in an emotional state where they're scared, where they're fearful, where they think that, the boogeyman is coming. They think that the city is going to be destroyed and he's the only person that can save it. And I mean, it's pretty diabolical, but it's very effective.
So you know me. Those who aren't here that don't know me, I don't know. You're going to get to know me, but I feel like I can see through a lot of the BS, but of course I'm affected as well because sometimes I have to sit down and think, well, what thoughts are my own? Why do I feel this way? Where did I get this from? Where did I hear that at? Because it is subconscious and it runs through our bodies and our minds and our dreams and our thoughts. So when I see something going viral or an energy on Instagram that's coming a certain way or whatever, I pull myself back and start to look at it and start to think, what is this really? So if you're not that type of person, tell me how you feel like some of these strategies that businesses use can get you caught up in their agenda that kind of has nothing to do with buying a pair of shoes or, whatever else it is?
Well, I mean, it's a system, and I think most people don't give a whole lot of thought to it and give a whole lot of credit that it's a science-driven system that you're up against, and they're measuring all the time. By the way, these ad agencies are not dummies. They're out there and they're using polls and they're using all types of techniques in order to gather sentiment to understand what is bubbling up to the surface. What are the sentiments out there? What are people angry about? What are people upset about? What do people want to change? With the recent protests, I can give you a couple of good examples because you mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned Kaepernick first, and then you mentioned the social justice protests that have been occurring more recently over the last 6 or 7 months. So what Nike does is so diabolically is they have a team of data scientists that are sitting back and they're just measuring all the time, and they're trying to see when sentiments start to get very, very high. And right at the right moment, such as in Kaepernick's situation where the kneeling became just a issue. It was a lightning bolt. I mean, it bubbled to the top, and I mean, it caused so much controversy. And then Trump jumps in and he says, you got to stand for the flag. And, us as Black people, we say, no, I mean, we're protesting racial injustice and we want to be heard. But then a third party comes in, and that third party is Nike. And what Nike does is Nike shoots an ad featuring Kaepernick in such a way that it appeases to the interest of Black people that, yes, we support Kaepernick in his racial injustice protest. And they shoot this commercial during the Super Bowl, and boom, it goes live. Half of the people go and burn Kaepernick's jerseys. More people go and buy Nike. So that was a $10 billion upswing. They got $10 billion in earned media just from doing that. Plus, they increased their sales, and they just did the same thing again with the racial injustice protest. They do it every single time. So if you study the stuff over time, when Nike is going to drop a new ad, and it's always about the underdog. And they always take an empathetic position of supporting the underdog. But what they're really doing is they're selling shoes.
That's very insensitive.
But that's what corporations do. And that's what Edward Bernays started back in the 1900s. Edward Bernays was the first person that got women to smoke cigarettes, by the way. He called them torches of freedom. So he tied cigarettes to the women's suffrage movement.
That's insane. And all of this stuff is happening right before our eyes. And I think people collectively really feel like Nike cares. Nike's for Black folks. Nike believes that and it don't got nothing to do with that. But we swear by these companies. We spend our money on these companies. We invest in these companies. We clown our friends if they're not rocking these companies. And it's all comes back to the dollar. So I have to ask, how do you think that we as people can get a hold of our minds back? How do we tell the difference between when we're being sold and when we really feel like we're invested in a product?
Well, if it's a corporation, you're being sold all the time. So
I'm tired of it.
I mean, you have to understand who has the control in society, and how society here in America is a capitalistic society, and how that society is structured from a social hierarchy standpoint, and why things work the way that they do as well. So it's a much deeper discussion to be able to understand when you're being sold and how you're being sold, because most of us have been sold. Like I said, you've been being sold since birth. You've been being you've been being manipulated since birth.
God, I can feel that. So wait, you brought up something about a social hierarchy. So I want you to explain your take on social hierarchy and how each vertical takes in information and on what level, and how things get to where they go product wise that way.
All right. So here in America, our society can be viewed in 5 distinct socioeconomic groups. And I use the word socioeconomic group and of course, that's a word that, you say it, you've heard it before, But what a socioeconomic group is it contains three things. It's social status, it's economic status, and it's power. So that's what a socioeconomic group is. And the way that our society is constructed, you can kind of think about a pyramid structure. You have wealthy at the top and you have broke at the bottom. But the control is happening from the top. And the people that are wealthy are also the people who have the corporations and who are doing the marketing to everybody at the bottom. So let me break down the five groups. At the bottom, you have broke. You know, when you're broke, it can be defined from an income basis of making less than $22,000 a year. And the primary goal of someone that's broke is survival. You don't have enough money to be able to have any feature comforts or anything. You're just trying to make it at that point. You ain't got no car. You may not have a place to stay or a stable place to stay. You don't have stable transportation. So really, your primary motivation and your primary goal in life is to be able to survive from day to day. And that's what your thinking is. Your thinking is day to day. So you go up a level above that and you have poor people. So poor people don't have day-to-day thinking. Poor people have week-to-week thinking because they're a little bit better off. So they're a little bit more stable than someone that's broke. But their goal is still survival because they function on a week-to-week basis. So, you know, you've heard the term paycheck to paycheck. You know, someone living paycheck to paycheck. I know I've been there. I've actually been broke and poor many times over. So, you know, I've gone up, I've gone down, I've gone up, I've gone down. So, you're on a week to week level, but your primary goal at that point is still to survive. Then we get to the third level, which most of us, if you were to do a poll and you started a poll right now and you asked all of the people here and most of the people that you know where they are, they would say they're in the middle. They would say middle class. Mm-hmm. And middle class is what most of us have been trained to seek. You know, when you go to school, you're told, you know, you graduate, you get a good job, you know, you get a house with the white picket fence, you have 2 kids, and you take a vacation every year. That's middle. And in the middle, your thinking is no longer day to day. Your thinking is no longer week to week. Your thinking is more month to month at this point. And because of that, you have a little surplus at that point. You can afford some of the feature comforts in life at that point. And that's what most people seek. They seek a life of comfort in the middle. They want to be middle class. And it's different than someone that's poor and someone that's broke because their primary goal is survival, where when you're in the middle, your primary goal is comfort. You don't want that comfort to be disrupted. So we go and we seek stable employment. We go and, you know, we get a house with a mortgage. You know, we go and do all these things because comfort is what drives us all at that point. And that's what marketers understand already. So many of the things that you look for when you look for that comfort are things that marketers have told you what comfort is at this point.
That's nuts.
Yeah, it gets deeper.
I mean, you could keep going because I know what you mean. It's like, you know what comfort really is? It's when you see the bottle of Coke and you're sold that this is joy and happiness, mm-hmm. Where you see these certain, you know, Carnival cruise packages. And like you said, it's one vacation a year, blah, blah, blah. Now you're investing. Like, it's all just such a business when really, to be honest, like maybe what makes somebody happy might be going to the beach. That's free. Putting their feet in the grass, enjoying their family. Like, we're not thinking.
No, you're not. I mean, because you've been told what to think. You know, you've been told that having a life in the middle is having a BMW, or, you know, having a life in the middle is having a Louis bag, or having a life in the middle is having 2 kids and a dog. I mean, these are all images that, you know, you see them in the magazines, you see them on TV, you know, you've been fed this stuff over and over and over again. And you don't even know what's been happening the whole time.
No, I completely agree. So you got to finish with, okay, we did broke, poor, middle, and there's right. 2 more. Before I ask this next question, there's 2 more.
Okay. So now we get to the deep part. So there are 2 more groups, and those 2 groups think radically different than the 3 groups that I just described. So down at the bottom is broke. When you're broke, you seek survival. You know, your day to day, you're trying to make it happen. You know, you're just trying to be able to get to the next day. Then on top of that group, that's a little bit better off, you have poor. And when you're poor, you're week to week. But if you mess up and you miss a paycheck, you right back down to broke again. And nobody wants that to happen. So you hustle. You know, you may work 2 jobs. You know, you're out there hustling. You know, you're out there, you working, you grinding. And most people at that level are hourly, so they don't have a whole lot of surplus there. There's not a lot of margin for error there. So if something goes down, just like something just went down, as we know about, we ain't gonna really touch it too much because that's a whole nother discussion also. But when things go down, you know, those are the people who get hurt first, and they get hurt fast. Then we move to the middle. And sometimes, you know, when you're looking at these things happen, you don't really understand what the disconnect is, because how can people not feel? How can people not be empathetic about what's going on? And the truth is because they're looking at it from a completely different position. Because when you're in comfort, okay, somebody just got laid off. Well, I didn't get laid off. I mean, I still got a month before something go down with me, so I don't really feel it the same way as somebody that's broken poor feels it. Now we get to level 4, which level 4 is rich at this point. So when you're rich, that's when you have an income above 150,000 a year. That's what classifies somebody as rich, just on this scale that we're talking about. So when you're rich, your thinking changes from year to year thinking. I'm sorry, your thinking changes from month to month thinking to year thinking. And your primary goal is not comfort. Your primary goal is freedom. So what most rich people understand is that they have to put processes in place because they don't want to be the one that's seeking comfort. Because the other thing that you get when you trade comfort for control. And most people don't understand that. When you sign up and you sign up for a corporation, your identity is taken from you. You're told what to think. You're told how to talk. You're told when you can take vacations. You're told all of these things. It's not your decision to do any of these things anymore. But the people who are controlling you are the people on the top 2 levels. First is rich, which rich people seek freedom. So they start to put businesses and processes in place to allow them to be free. So they don't abide by the same rules as you because they're not controlled the same way that you are. They make the rules. Their group has them. They have more social status, they have more economic status, and they have more power than you do because they're rich. They can do things that you can't do. And then on top of that is wealthy. And when you're wealthy, you're at the very top. And as a matter of fact, people at the top 1% in America has about $2.4 million to even enter the top category. You have to have $2.4 million in assets to even enter there. And that's the bottom. But the top 1% of wealthy own 30% of the income. They get 30% of the income. And so a third of the income goes to the top 1%. Only 3% of the income goes to the whole bottom quintile that's down there, which is poor. So poor people only get 3%. 1% of wealthy get 33%.
That's insane.
And that's how our society functions. So that's why Trump gets on there and he says the things that he says, because he's on a whole different level. He ain't trying to connect with you. He's just trying to get people to be manipulated to give him the vote, because what he really is doing is controlling the interests of the 1%. And that's the group that he's from.
So how do you suggest, right? Because I mean, this might be a little bit spiritual, a little bit mental, and a little bit emotional. How do you go from, first of all, what you just explained? I'm not sure that people are from a day-to-day thinking about that, because they're in the day-to-day. They've got, like you said, your jobs, the comfort. They're either trying to make it day-to-day, week to week, or they're just in there in the middle and feeling good about being able to go home to something cute and air conditioned because they drove home in their decent Infiniti and they got the basics, they're good. Yeah. So how do you suggest, and what do you think happens to a person to get them to think outside of the level of the bottom 3 and get on up there to the top 2 and think more about freedom and really having a say about what actually goes on in this entire country?
So it's interesting because what most people do is to express to level up. So when you're looking to move from the middle to rich, how most people express that is through something called conspicuous consumption. So you buy things that express your virtue. So as you just mentioned, you may buy the Audi, you might buy, the big Benz, you may buy the bag, you may buy a Birkin bag, you might buy all these things. And what you're saying, when you own these things, is that, yo, I've leveled up. I'm on the next level. And you want people to know that you have leveled up because you can afford things that people at the bottom cannot afford. People in the middle cannot necessarily afford. So, but that's just another method by which marketers use to be able to continue to get you duped back into the same cycle again. Because you're not, when you purchase those things, you're not adding to your wealth. That's not necessarily an asset in most of those cases. It's something that you're flaunting that shows your virtue. And it means something. It has an ascribed status. It has a status to it that clever marketers and people who build brands have built this stuff. I mean, it's the same manufacturers making the bags. We just put a label on it and said that, you're this if you buy this.
It's nuts because we're very caught up in that. We're so wildly caught up in it. Again, it just goes back to people not knowing how to think for themselves. And that's very dangerous. Like, this is, yeah, that's dangerous because at this point, anything can be said to get you to literally do anything. Like you'll damn near abandon your own kids if the right marketing campaign comes out and tells you to leave them on the side of the road. Like,
the right
is that what we're doing?
Yeah, the right message can hit us all. I mean, the right message is hitting me. I've done things and, I've bossed up and, bought my BMWs and, got the condos and, all of the stuff because I felt like I was leveling up. So, I mean, we're all affected by it.
Big time. And when you were saying that stuff, I started thinking about, even though this doesn't have so much to do with economics, well, it kind of does, it kind of doesn't. But when it comes to like dating and marriage and who you choose and who the guys are going after, who the girls thinks is blah, 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 blah. Like, how do you feel like we're being marketed to in that sense? Like, I just had to throw that in there because I'm like,
well, we're really marketing to one another.
That is true. But even the way we do that, we're marketing to one another. But for example, right? Like right now, this whole thing about having a butt or implants or whatever girls are doing with their butts now. It's like still, it's a marketing form of manipulation to tell you, but would women even be doing that if mainstream media wasn't saying WAP, Cardi, Ash, strippers, that, like, would that even be, do you think that that's part of a scheme in its own when it comes to marketing and PR?
Yeah, so I mean, the way that society functions is that someone has put meaning to something, someone has put value to something. It has a certain value. So whether Cardi B did it intentionally or not, it has value that people see value in it, and people want to replicate something that they deem value in.
Right. So real Malcolm Ed, you put nope, but what were you saying no to? If you could put it in the comments, because I'm just, while you were talking, I was just thinking like, okay, because there's sometimes a certain, when you watch, well, back in the day, because nobody watches music videos anymore, but back in the day when you're watching music videos, blah, 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 it's like, it was like the Air Force Ones, the chains, the mixed chicks, the curly hair, the boot. Yeah, it was like a thing. And it's like, that's what people went out and wanted and did. And, so it's like, okay.
And by the way, people still watch music videos. They just watch it on streams now.
Right. True.
It's more popular than ever.
Oh, rap and celebrities have an influence. Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's still part of a setup and marketing scheme to get us to do whatever it is. Sometimes I can't see what the bigger picture is to have people chasing all of these different things in a scattered different direction without checking with themselves internally to see what it is they really want, what they're really about, and how to really actually move forward in an authentic way.
And a record label is a marketing company, by the way, and so is the NFL and the NBA and all of these. They're marketing companies.
So I think when we had this conversation, do you hear all this clicking?
I do.
Okay. Is that a little bit better at the moment?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So yes, real Malcolm Ed said it's a distraction. And so I would love to be a part of a conversation that kind of reminds people that everything we're looking at ain't real. A lot of stuff is designed and created to distract us. And so it's almost like, yeah, how do you play the game if you don't know your enemy?
Right. So part of the goal of marketing, and when we start talking about Edward Bernays and we start talking about Freud, and Freud felt like humans could not be trusted because there was these powerful forces that were inside of humans, that they were irrational beings and they would make irrational decisions and all those things. So part of that strategy was, let's keep them in a perpetual state of happiness. So let's start to give them products. Let's start to find things that can put them into a perpetual state of happiness, because the reality is that because of these hidden powerful forces, they have to be controlled, so we have to keep them happy.
But that's just weird to me, because the real evil and the real issue is the marketing. I think there's so much power in being able to think for yourself, don't you?
I agree. Unfortunately, thinking for yourself is not taught in most schools. Most schools have not taught people logic. Most people have not taught people how to handle bias. So if you're a philosopher, then now you understand how to deconstruct and think for yourself, but most of us are not philosophers.
I wonder how it is that you can teach a child from, I talk to my friends with kids, and I'm sorry, this clicking. Real Malcolm Ed said dopamine overdose. No, it's true. It's a dopamine overdose. It's understanding the neuropsychology of people and continuing to feed them whatever you need to feed them just to keep them right here. Just like the pharmaceutical industry is a perpetual state of sickness. Like, you ain't gonna be better, but you ain't gonna die. We just need you to stay on these meds, all of them. Like,
So if you start doing a little research, you'll start to understand that in terms of wealth, since the Reagan administration back in the 80s, the wealth of the middle class has actually declined. Most of the new wealth has gone to the top 1%. And that's been going on for 40 years now.
yeah, so I get he said, "Oh, I'm here for this."
The middle class always gets played.
And
Because
that's where the majority is. Yeah.
Think about how a pyramid is structured. A pyramid is narrow at the top, and then it goes down, and then of course it gets wider at the base. But what's feeding the top and what's supporting the top is the base itself, which is the bottom.
And so the bottom would be the poor. I mean, the broke.
Well, the poor, the broke, not so much, because the broke, no one wants to really be able to classify themselves as broke. So the broke are almost hidden. They're the people that people look at kind of with disdain. Because most people think they're better off by being in the middle, but the middle is part of that base also, and that's the largest part of the base. Honestly, is the middle.
Okay, so real Malcolm Ed said, because of the mindset, the middle class consumers are more predictable.
Absolutely. Because you've been told what to think.
I was gonna say we're the ones with the iPhones, the ones with the who are making the moves, because like you said, it's that little bit of more money to be able to do something, but you got to stay working, especially with the growth of data, and especially with the growth of the data mined from technology. Yes, the data mined from technology. That's what I try to get people to understand. It's like, I love to ask questions, because it's like, before you jump on a bandwagon, do you even know whose bandwagon you're getting on? And why? Why are you so mad? Why are you so invested? Why are you so here for everything that you're literally being sold without knowing why that's happening?
And by the way, data mining is not a new concept. Data mining was being done back in the 30s and 40s. That was part of the strategy from the big advertisers, then they start doing what's called focus groups. And you've heard of Gallup polls and you've heard of focus groups. That was data mining. They were mining data then to be able to come back and understand how you thought, to be able to know how to hit you with products. And the same thing that politicians do, by the way.
Same thing that politicians do.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're using the internet, you have to understand that the algorithms themselves have bias. So once it gets a lot deeper because we start getting to the conversation about AI and how AI starts to do suggestive filtering and starts to present something to you based upon what you've already searched for. So you just go deeper and deeper into a rabbit hole. And now all of your thoughts are influenced. That's why we have so much fragmentation now. Back in the day, you only had so many different channels. You only had cable channels. So the message that you were presented with, and even before then, it was radio. So you only had so many radio stations. So national broadcast was the message. And not to say that that message hadn't been politicized, because it had. Not to say that that message didn't have bias in it, because it did. But it's just much more of it now.
It's flooded. Real Malcolm Ed in here said nostalgia is a father mucker. It ties you to things emotionally that may no longer serve you, like McDonald's.
Dopamine. Don't you want a little dopamine? Don't you want to think of a good time? And especially in the midst of, everything that's going on right now, and everybody's upset and everybody's tense and everybody has all the cortisol flowing because you're upset and you're angry. It's a perpetual state of happiness. That's what you have to understand.
I'm just trying to figure out, how do we clear the noise a little bit so that way we're making healthier decisions? Because everything that we do is tied to everything that we're talking about right now. The way we treat people, the way we love our families, the things that we buy, the way we treat our bodies, everything.
So, that's very interesting because it goes back to the socioeconomic model again. So unless you have those resources in your immediate circle, depending on what group you are, where else are you going to get quality information from? Do the people that you know, do the people that you grew up with, do you have epidemiologists that you grew up with? Do you have people who are global economists that you grew up with? Can you pick up the phone and can you call those people directly who can give you this information? Most of us can't.
But what part of things become innate? And what part of them becomes so innate that you know what to seek out in order to get a better result?
Well, first you have to understand what is okay. So we have to go a little bit deeper, because what we're starting to talk about is objective things. What can be an objective truth? And to be able to get to a truth, it has to be something that I can measure, something that you can measure, and it comes to the same conclusion. So that's an objective truth. Now, an objective truth is different than a personal truth. You can have a personal truth that differs from an objective truth and it's still a truth to you, but it's not a truth to me. We've moved away from any objectivity in truth, and that's what's occurring. That's why things are so crazy right now. Because if you're not using a basis that can be objective to start with, how can you ever say anything is true? Now, it's still truth on a personal level. Now, if you agree with what I'm saying, it's our personal truth, and a personal truth. I can't say that a personal truth is not your truth. It's just not an objective truth.
That's nuts. It makes all the sense, because the further down we go, down the path that we go with things, even more so today than ever, we're trying to appease everybody and the way everybody thinks. We don't want nobody to be wrong. You know what I'm saying? It's like we've created so many fragments to appease everyone. I could say whatever the hell I want. And if I make a big enough fuss about it, it becomes law somewhere for the other 4 people that feel the same way as me.
No, I think where we are now, we're very interested in appeasing ourselves first. And we don't have a sense or camaraderie for doing the best thing for the community anymore. It's much more about self than it is about the group as a whole. As long as we good, well, I ain't, all that other stuff. I don't really care about that.
It's true. It's messed up.
Got mine.
God, that's insane. You shared
I don't
so
have to buy
many.
it, so I'm good. I can do whatever I want to do.
It's true. It's true. We're so complex yet so simple, and sometimes we're really making a mess of things. It's like a beautiful chaos that we live in, dealing with all this stuff.
And guess what? It was Edward Bernays that did this back in the that was his strategy back in the 1900s. Do yourself a favor and check it out. There's a documentary out there that was put out by the BBC. It's called Century of Self. Fascinating.
I'm gonna watch that. I know it's like 4 hours long, so get your little bite size together. Do maybe an hour a day. But the Century of Self, you can find that on YouTube. I'm so sorry about this clicking. But I want to definitely watch that, because I feel like the more you know, or the more you know about the game you're playing, the more you can do what you got to do, whatever you feel like that is. If you need to turn off social media a little bit more to hear yourself about it, do that. If you feel like to be in touch with your spirit and your feelings enough to know when enough is enough, when you need to, do you know what I'm saying? Like, how do we learning to self-navigate just a little bit more, so that everything isn't so swayed and controlled within you from the outside. Like, there has to be these moments where you're like, ooh, that don't sit right in my spirit.
Yeah. I mean, you have to seek objectivity. And that's the key. You have to seek objectivity. If you're not seeking objectivity, it's always going to be biased.
Yeah. Plain and simple.
We all have bias, by the way.
Yeah, we do. I do. We do.
We all raised a certain type of way. We all have culture. We have standards. We have all of these things that, that's what creates bias in the first place.
Right.
A lot of those things are by design. I mean, that's how our society is structured. But yet and still, you have to still be able to seek something objective. You have to be able to find something that can be true no matter whether I say it or whether you say it or whether someone else says it. It's still true. Just like gravity. If I walk to the window and I jump out the window right now, I'm not going to go up. I'm going to go down. And if you go to your window and you jump out the window, you're not going to go up either. You're going to go down too. That's an objective truth.
Makes sense to me. I mean, yeah, we're all out here just doing our best, because that's a lot. Like, you just dropped a lot of jewels, a lot of gems. I hope that you guys watching got an opportunity to just glean and gain something from this. So I'm going to talk a little less, because I think this thing is clicking when I'm talking. So before we get out of here, do you have anything that you want to share that you may not have shared, or just a little nugget to wrap this all up, so people kind of understand from a marketing perspective what they're up against and how to rock with it in their own way?
Okay. So part of my message and part of what I enjoy doing is I represent people, and I want to talk directly to people who started from the bottom. I was one that started from the bottom. I'm from a working poor family. And my whole life and my mission in life has been to try to understand what the differences were. Because from a very early age, from the first grade, I got bused to a school and all of my classmates were white kids. And I started to understand the differences between myself and them very early on, because the things that they talked about, they had cars, they had beautiful homes, they took vacations, they did all of these things. And when I came home in the evening, I went back to a shotgun house. And if you don't know what a shotgun house is, it's 3 rooms. It's a front room, it's a bedroom, and it's a kitchen, and they're all lined up. So if you open the door in the front and you open the door in the back, if you shot, you could shoot through the whole house. That's what I grew up in. And I grew up in a home with my grandfather, my grandmother, my mother, my aunts. It was maybe about 10 of us living in that 1-bedroom house. And my whole family, my whole adult family, my granddad, my grandmama, my mama, my aunts went to work every day, and they worked very hard. However, things never really changed for us, and I didn't know why. because when I would get on the bus and I would go to the school, we would drive through these nice neighborhoods and they had these beautiful homes and they had these swimming pools and they had these nice cars and they had all this stuff. And I'm wondering, what is the difference? So the way that our society is constructed, for someone who starts at the bottom, and that's if you're born into a broke family and you start at the bottom, you have only 70% of people who are born at the bottom actually excel to the next socioeconomic group. So people who are born broke, only 70% even reach poor or above. If you're Black, that goes to 50%. So if you're born broke and you're Black, that's 50% of people remain there by the age of 40. So part of that is understanding how our society is structured, what you're up against. And when you start to understand the layers and what you're up against, now you can start to react and start to be empowered to understand, like, oh, that's why I have to boss up. That's why I got to go hard, because I got to be able to get up 4 or 5 levels at this point. And it's not going to be easy, and it's going to require a long-term goal to be able to get there. And it's going to require continuing to educate yourself. It's going to require continuing to have these conversations and seek out people who've done it before to kind of shorten your path to be able to do it.
And this is what we call breaking generational curses.
Yep. That's what it's all about. My path to do that is through e-commerce. That's why I became a marketer.
That's amazing. Well, I'm so proud of you for getting to the next level. What we're all out here trying to do, and really using our resources to make sure that we do that, so our kids can start at a different level of the pyramid and continue to go from there. So I'm here for it. You shared such amazing information. Before we get out of here, do you have a project or something that you're working on that you want to share with people, or guide them to anything so they can continue to stay in touch with you?
Well, I just started doing a live stream series. It's called From the Bottom. I'll be publishing a book probably within the next 30 days, which is From the Bottom also. And I just look forward to continuing to share this information with people like myself, people who are interested in understanding these things, and people who are interested in leveling up. Also do some training on e-commerce as well. I still think that's a pathway with a pretty low barrier of entry, that we can learn those skills and we can apply them, and we could really accelerate using that. And now is the time. As you see, retail is starting to die out. COVID is kind of putting the final nail in the coffin in retail. Everything has been shifting towards e-commerce for the last 4 or 5 years. And e-commerce probably will start to overtake retail within the next 2 years.
So y'all hear it, get the book, follow Mick, get with it. So if any of this interests you and that particular path interests you, take it so you can get a piece of this pie. Like, if we're thinking ahead, and like you just said about retail and recognizing the patterns and seeing what's going on, we have the opportunity to jump in front of it and take advantage, because you could be making $60,000 a month just like anybody else, and they don't even have to see your face. You don't even have to leave your house.
Yes, you can.
So now we're not talking about, oh, I didn't get the job because they don't like Black, or they don't. You behind the computer. You just need the skill and the will.